Hello everybody, welcome back to another live stream, and today we're going to be talking about something completely off topic from martial arts. It's about the current state of what's happening in Iran in the Middle East. So why are we talking about this? It's because this is something which I personally feel very, very close to. I feel very, very connected to. I was raised in the Middle East. I spent my childhood in the Middle East. I speak Arabic. I'm of Jewish heritage. Iran itself, or Persia, it's quite an anglicized name for the region, but Iran, I studied a lot of Iranian history growing up, and I especially became quite interested specifically in Zoroastrianism as a religion. Not just Zoroastrianism, but I mean Iran and Persia and Persian history, Persian culture, a collective. So that is why I'm deciding to do this video about the current state of Iran and what's actually happening in Iran at the moment. It's a very personal type of live stream. Additionally to that, I have said in previous live streams as well that when I do live streams with this channel, it's not always going to be about martial arts. And if anything, narrative live stream is going away from martial arts and it's going into more socio-political things, more sociological, more psychological. But let's get into the video itself because a lot is going on in Iran at the moment. So if you have not been following the news, Iran at the moment is going through what could be considered a revolution. Everyday Iranians have had enough of the autocratic government which they have. This government is known as Islamic Republic Guard Corps, or the IRGC. Shortened back down, it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that is the self-titled name that the Iranian government has actually given itself, and by extension, the rest of the country. And the rest of the country did not want this. So what happened? Let's go a little bit back. So when I say go back, we're going to go like just 20th century, because we could go back thousands of years. Iran is so rich in history. And let's just start off by going recent history. So throughout the 20th century, Iran was ruled by what's called Shah. And Shah in Persianite languages simply means king. So Persia was ruled by kings. It was a monarchy. The system of government they had was a monarchy. Like most monarchies, it was passed down hereditary, king to princes. Every so often you'd get rival factions or rival groups who then overthrow the current monarchy and establish their own dynasty. The dynasty of Iran during the 20th century was the Pahlavi. And Iran had the Pahlavi dynasty through the majority of the 20th century. The Shah, and quite often in Iran, you hear the most recent Shah of Iran just called the Shah. So for the sake of this video, I'll be referring to him as the Shah, even though they've had numerous other Shahs throughout history. But the Shah was very much westernized. He wanted to modernize Iran. He wanted to bring Iran on par with Europe, Western Europe at the time, because Europe was still in the Cold War, and you got a very noticeable East and West Europe. And the Shah wanted to bring Iran in line with Western Europe, and he wanted to bring Iran in line with the United States. Iranians, as well as themselves, are very, very proud people. They don't see themselves as inferior, and nor should they. They don't see themselves as second world country citizens. They don't see themselves as any sort of inferior to Europeans or Americans. And to all intents and purposes, Iranians actually see themselves very much as equals to the Western Hemisphere, or the Anglosphere, so to speak. Iran as well have a very, very rich, complex history, as I've said. They've given a lot to the world looking at historical values. I believe the United Nations actually, it's not the front of the United Nations, but I believe in one of the main assembly halls of the United Nations, they actually have like a Charter of Human Rights. And I believe the first Charter of Human Rights actually came from Iran. It came from King Cyrus. from the Achaemenid dynasty many thousands of years ago. So that the beginnings of human rights, even though they may have been quite basic back then, stemmed from Iran. So because of that and many other reasons, a lot of Iranians do consider themselves to be very much equals to the West. And the Shah believed likewise. The Shah was thinking, I'm proud of myself, I'm proud of my country. Iran has had, in recent centuries, very turbulent history. Let's modernize the country. So the Shah was very much pro-West. He wanted to encourage Western involvement. He wanted to encourage Western investment, is the word I'm trying to say. He wanted to ally himself with the West, and very much he was an ally to the West. He was an ally to the United States. This didn't sit too well with both other domestic Iranians, a small minority of Iranians in Iran, and it also didn't sit well with the wider Middle East. It also didn't sit well with left-wing groups in Europe and the United States. How didn't this fit? So a lot of Iranians enjoyed freedom in Iran prior to 1979, when they had their revolution, which we'll come on to. But Iranians could freely work. Many of them were entrepreneurs. They went to go and study abroad in Europe or America. Then they went back home to Iran, and they took a lot of the skills they'd learnt back into Iran to invest in Iran and help build up the infrastructure in Iran and skill up a lot of the people and education establishments in Iran. So on the surface, one would think that is surely a good thing. So that's good. That's good for Iran. It's good for the people of Iran. Why should anybody oppose that? The answer lies in cultural relativism. And many cultures in the Middle East don't value personal liberty. They're not libertarian. They don't want to see the individual succeeding. It's more of a class, cult, group, collective mentality, which ties in with communism, which is also, communism doesn't like the individual. Communism is very much like you have to benefit the group. And a lot of the culture of the Middle East at that time was very in line with communism. Going slightly off topic, that's why you get a lot of socialists or left-wing leaning groups will side with a lot of like Islamic extremism, because a lot of the collectivism, the downplaying of the individual go hand in hand together. So the culture of that region did not sit well with what the Shah wanted of Iran or what the Shah envisioned for Iran. The Shah wanted to make Iran, like I said, a modern country. He wanted to bring it in line with Europe, Western Europe. As we mentioned, Europe was still in the Cold War, or the world was in the Cold War, but you got East and West Europe politically. The Shah very much wanted to bring Iran in line with Western Europe. He wanted to bring it in line with the United States. He wanted Iran to be the powerhouse of the Middle East. And when I say powerhouse, I appreciate that sounds very militaristic. It was on one hand, but not just in that way. The Shah wanted Iran to be culturally the powerhouse of the Middle East. Iran has so much history. Scenically, it's a beautiful country. Historically, it's beautiful. Anybody who goes as a tourist to Iran, and I would love to visit Iran. It's on my bucket list to go and see Iran, to go and see places like Isfahan, Yazd, Kerman, Mashhad, Shiraz. Not Tehran so much, because Tehran's more like a modern kind of city. But I'd love to see the old, ancient, medieval type of cities in Iran. I've seen pictures of them. They truly are beautiful. But the Shah wanted to make Iran a powerhouse of tourism. He wanted to make Iran a powerhouse of education. He wanted to modernize Iran so Iranian women could get jobs. Iranian women could drive cars. Iranian women could have power in the house as well. They weren't secluded. They weren't isolated. They weren't shoved into the kitchen and told to shut up and get their feet under the kitchen sink. The Shah was very much a westernized individual, but that made him the pariah in the Middle East. and surrounded by a lot of other Middle Eastern countries who didn't share that same vision. Most of the Middle East is historically been very suspicious of external influences, external cultures, specifically European culture. And again, you can look at the history between various Middle Eastern countries, even though the countries of the Middle East now are different to what the countries were historically. It's all been changed. But you'd always see there was a lot of friction, there was a lot of suspicion, there was a lot of wars. And we're talking like starting from crusades in the Middle Ages, but also subsequent wars. The siege of Malta in the 16th century, Skanderbeg in Albania fighting the Ottoman Turks. We digress, but I'd like to feel that maybe I've given you the picture of how incompatible those cultures were. So they didn't like the Shah. The rest of the region did not like the Shah because of that. They thought, who's this man who's trying to make something of Iran? He's trying to build, Iran's going to become powerful. It's got the backing of the West, who, as we've just said, a lot of other countries in that region are very suspicious of the United States and Europe, so they didn't like that. They saw Shah had been allied essentially to infidels, is how they saw it, culturally and religiously. So they were very suspicious of the Shah. Iran's main enemy in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, and that is mostly based on theocratic schisms or religious schisms. Saudi Arabia is predominantly Sunni Muslim. Iran is predominantly Shia Muslim. And Shia and Sunni Muslims have always been at loggerheads with each other. They call each other heretical. But that was the core crux, so to speak, of the rivalry between Saudi on the Arabian Peninsula and Iran, who occupied, or Persia, which occupied the Iranian plateau just north of the Arabian Peninsula. So we've now established that the region was very suspicious of the Shah. They didn't like him. There were a few extremists in Iran itself, political extremists who used religion as a driving force of their ideologies and their greater plans. They didn't want to modernize Iran. And these people took umbrage to the Shah, and they were chanting for his downfall. They said he was too westernized. They said that he was corrupting the country. He was bringing in too many external influences, and by external, it was mostly American influences, Americanized influences he was bringing to Iran. And a lot of people, this minority in Iran, this extremist minority, didn't like that. They wanted to keep Iran oppressed, or in their mind, they wanted to keep Iran traditional. And when I say traditional, I'm talking culturally conservative. They wanted to keep it free from becoming modern, essentially. The Shah, he established something called Savak, which essentially was secret police force. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, but Savak was primarily, to root out communists in Iran. It also was trying to root out extremists in Iran. So Savak actually went on, so to speak, it was a purge. They went on a purge trying to root out these extremists and hardline communists. And a lot of these extremists and communists fled Iran. Ironically, they sought sanctuary in the West. And I believe it was the main cleric was a man called Ayatollah Khomeini. And he left Iran to flee Savak and the Shah, and he went to Paris. So he sought sanctuary in Paris, which the irony there is then saying, okay, there's this man here who absolutely hates Western culture, Western values, democracy, freedom of expression, libertarianism, and he's now fled to Paris, which is, as people well know, is well known for its very artistic lifestyle, its very artistic culture. So there's irony there. He then, Ayatollah Khomeini, he was stirring up a lot of resentment towards the Shah from Paris and garnering support in greater Europe, people to his cause. And he appealed to both communists and he appealed to students. And again, students the world over, university students have traditionally always been quite left-wing leaning. And they see themselves as siding with perceived oppressed people. And a lot of people saw Ayatollah Khomeini, this man with a big beard, and he looked really holy and spiritual, and he'd been forced out of his country and forced to seek refuge in Paris. What a poor, oppressed man. So the students immediately empathized with him without knowing the full story, that actually Ayatollah Khomeini was not a nice man. That is the mind of the very socialist establishments that had the universities in the West. But the prime, I'd say, gripe against the Shah actually from the United States itself. Now, as we said, the Shah was an ally of the United States. And Iran could very well have been a very powerful ally to the United States if the Shah's ambitions and dreams for Persia had come to fruition. The Democrats, at around the late 1970s, they saw Iran was becoming powerful. Now, it was Jimmy Carter and President Jimmy Carter's administration. They looked at Iran and said, we would rather have a weak enemy in the region who we can control, as opposed to a strong ally who we cannot control. So the Americans turned their back, or the Jimmy Carter administration turned their back on the Shah and Iran. And they wanted to make an enemy of Iran. They thought, if we have a weak Iran, we can control them. And us, as the Jimmy Carter administration of the States, we can basically impose our diktat on the Middle East. We can control it, and we can control these weak enemies that we have, all fragmented and unpopular with their own people. The Shah was offering a hand of support and friendship to the States. The Shah wanted to be an equal partner to the United States, and the Shah could well have given the States a lot and could have received a lot of support from the States in return. It could have been a partnership based on mutual respect. And I'm not just talking militaristically, I'm talking culturally as well. But the United States didn't want it. They wanted to control that region, and they thought that with a weak Iranian government in place that we can control, we can do that. So they helped orchestrate the overthrow of the Shah. The Shah fled the country amidst demonstrations and rising civil unrest, which was stoked by the Ayatollah Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini's followers, and also the American administration, who believe that actually we believe that we can control Iran, so we're not going to offer any help. We're going to let this slide. Shah fled. Ayatollah Khomeini came back to Iran from his exile in Paris. Pretty much next day, Ayatollah Khomeini started his tyrannical regime called the Islamic Republic of Iran. They changed the flag. The flag of Iran that you see today is not the traditional flag of Iran. It came from the IRGC. And I believe they actually installed it on a diktat without consenting the people of Iran as well. So for me personally, whenever I see the Iranian flag that it is now, the IRGC, I personally don't see that as the Iranian flag. I see that as a symbol of brutality. I see that as a symbol of oppression and bloodshed. I see that as a symbol of just evil, quite frankly. And I refuse to salute that flag. Not that I should anyway, but I don't feel anything positive when I see that flag. Spiritually, emotionally, culturally, in connection to Persian friends I have. And they also imposed, when Ayatollah came in, he imposed his own government, which was keeping to very strict Islamic, theocratic system of government, Sharia law. Part of this was women had to cover themselves up. They had to wear the hijab. All the liberties and freedoms and libertarianism of Iran's people were suddenly oppressed. Music was allowed. It had to be music of a certain particular type. Various Western vices that the Ayatollah and the IRGC deemed. They looked at any cultural practice which wasn't in line with their own way of thinking. They considered heretical, and most of this was Western. They saw ties as a symbol of Westernization, so people weren't allowed to wear ties. You couldn't wear certain other Westernized clothes. You couldn't listen to certain Westernized music. Women weren't allowed to do certain things. Your freedom of expression was clamped down on and reduced. You weren't allowed to talk about certain things. You weren't allowed to criticize the government. If you weren't happy with certain things, you had people going around literally knocking on your door and taking you off to prison. And a lot of these cases as well, actually, they didn't even ask for proof. It was just simply an allegation. If somebody went into an Iranian or an IRGC police station or guard post and said, yep, my neighbor, he's been saying bad things about the Ayatollah, your supreme leader, police would go around there, literally take them to prison and beat them up. This has been the way of Iran since 1979. Oppression, keeping people with their heads basically under the water. Any demonstrations which have come out of Iran since 1979 have been met with very aggressive government response. A lot of the time, people have actually been executed for daring to speak up against the government, and not even speaking up against the Iranian government in a forceful way. It's simply just expressing a dissatisfaction with how the IRGC governs Iran. These people have disappeared. The most infamous Iranian prison is one called Evin Prison, which is located in Tehran, the capital city. This prison is known for its extremely harsh conditions. People have been, quite often people who go in there never come out. People who do come out report extreme abuses, which range from torture, psychological torture, rapes by prison guards, being attacked by dogs, and having like indoctrinations being forced onto them as well. And quite often people who go to Evin Prison are nothing more. They're not criminals. They're simply people who have voiced opposition to the IRGC. That is the sign of a dictatorship, when you send people to prison simply for just expressing dissatisfaction. So, as we mentioned, have the Iranian people put up with this? No, they've not. Iranians have been resisting the IRGC almost since day one of the IRGC coming in. But a lot of these protests, they lack, there's the pattern that we see with Iranian protests against the IRGC in Iran, a lot of them lack clear leadership. That is not necessarily the fault of the Iranians themselves, but as soon as the IRGC get wind that there's going to be protests or civil unrest against the IRGC, they turn off the internet, which in this day and age, we all need the internet. It's not a luxury. It's the main way we communicate. We're even communicating now over the internet. The Iranian government turns that off immediately. So that makes communication between protesters extremely difficult. What you'd have to do then is literally go into the street with placards. You're a clear target. The police, the secret police that the IRGC employ, they see who you are immediately, and they can come, they can beat you up, they can arrest you and take you off before you've even said, I hate the IRGC. Silencing dissent as well. The Iranian government, the IRGC, uses groups called Basij, B-A-S-I-J. It's a form of, it's like the Iranian equivalent of the brown shirts in World War II that Hitler used to go around and break up certain groups who are mingling, who the government didn't like them mingling with. They'd send the brown shirts round and beat them up. Well, the IRGC do the same, but they have the Basij who do that. They basically employ, on a street level, they employ hired thugs. And these hired thugs, basically, they're poor, they're uneducated, they probably don't care about political ideologies or even religious ideologies, but if they have a government official saying, right, in my neighborhood, I want you to go around and basically beat up anybody who's not dressed properly, and I'll give you some money. And these people, like I said, being poor and uneducated, they'll do it as long as they get money at the end of the day. It's not right in any way, shape, or form. But that's how the IRGC instills fear on a street level. Not to mention threats about executing people if you voice your opposition to the government. Not to mention that these executions are done in a very undignified way. I've read and seen reports of people being hung, but literally they're hung by cranes, diggers, who attach ropes around their neck, affix them onto like the arm of a digger, and very slowly the arm of a digger will go up, which then gradually pulls the rope underneath. You know, this is very graphic, but it literally chokes them. They're not given the decency of standing on something, having the chair kicked out away from underneath them, and then drop with the possibility of them breaking their neck, getting an instant death. They're not given that dignity. They're given mock executions as well. They take a prisoner out into a courtyard or a basement, get them all ready to be executed, and then at the very last minute they're saying, oh no, you're going to go back to your cell. Psychologically, you're bracing yourself to die. You're thinking, this is it, I'm now going to go to heaven or hell. And then you're taken to your cell again, and you're thinking, well, I don't need to explain how inhumane that is. Went on a slight tangent there, but I felt as though that does need to be flushed out. The systematic torture of everyday Iranians for little more than expressing discontent with their lot. So I feel, like I said, a lot of protests have happened over the years, but they lack that clear leadership. The IRGC has been, I hate to say it, but they've been very good at being able to break up a lot of these protests. They sever the communication between these groups trying to organize protests. They starve them of supplies. They instill the fear of God into them, and that ultimately breaks up these protests. So the IRGC, despite being consciously aware that a lot of Iranians don't even like them and would love to see them being overthrown, the IRGC have always been able to actually keep a lid on that pot of boiling water until 2022, which I feel deserves to get mentioned, because the last big protest we saw in Iran against the IRGC were the Mahsa Amini protests. Mahsa Amini was a young lady in Iran who refused to wear her hijab, and she was killed by the IRGC for it. That sparked widespread protests around Tehran, around Iran in general, and it got a lot of publicity from the Iranian diaspora across the world, and not even the Iranian diaspora, but just other people in the rest of the world looked at this, and I feel that they then became more aware of actually how brutal this government was. I mean, there'd always been, the last 20 or so years, people in the West had kids in the West, teenagers in the West, early 20s in the West, and certainly me growing up, always vaguely aware that this Iranian government was not kosher. And I don't see that with any joke intended. But nobody knew really how brutal the regime actually was until we saw the Mahsa Amini protests. And the Mahsa Amini protests drew in thousands upon thousands of people. It wasn't just like a few hundred people protesting in the street. It was huge. And it went on for much longer than I think what the IRGC were prepared for. So that scared them, I feel. And it was really the beginning of the end. The next protests were the ones that actually happened just before New Year's, which I'm going to actually bring up now because I've got quite a few pages actually in the background. So we're actually going to go through just the basic background of the current protests. Bear in mind, this is the first major protest since the Mahsa Amini in 2022. But I'll take a sip of my Persian tea, then I'll just go through the stage by stage in basic of what's happened now. And the protests we're actually seeing in Iran. So first and foremost, like I said, I feel these protests that are going on now should really be called a revolution, because that's what a lot of Iranians are actually calling it. They're not wanting to stop until the IRGC is overthrown. So this is from Wikipedia. I'm very much aware Wikipedia can be changed and edited, so it's not really a reliable source. But I'm going to read from this because it's analytical. So let me bring that up. It's just loading. I've also got a map of Iran as well. And also as well, another page, which I'll discuss with you in a little bit later on, actually, which I feel is very insightful about the current state of things and how the IRGC may actually be on its last knees. But I'll read about these protests. Again, when this page loads, aha, here we go. So, this page, Wikipedia, 2025 to 2026, Iranian protests. Like I said, I personally debate that. I feel it's more of a revolution. So beginning on the 28th of December 2025, demonstrations erupted across multiple cities in Iran amid nationwide unrest against the Islamic Republic government and a deepening economic crisis. This event has been the largest uprising since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which we discussed earlier in the live stream. It was kind of like how that 1979 revolution came around. The ensuing crackdown, carried out under Ali Khamenei's and senior officials' order for live fire on protesters, resulted in massacres that left thousands of protesters dead, making them some of the largest massacres in modern Iranian history. Now, that is true. Ali Khamenei is the current supreme leader of Iran. And again, any leader of a country who gives themselves a name like supreme leader, it's reflective and suggestive of narcissism. It's reflective and suggestive of megalomania. Nobody calls themselves supreme or grand master, leader, whatever, unless it says something about themselves, how they perceive themselves and the state of their regime. But basically, Ali Khamenei is the guy who pulls the strings. Ali Khamenei, not to be confused with Ayatollah Khamenei from 1979. It's a different guy. Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. Ali Khamenei, as far as we know, is still alive. But he is the leader of Iran. He's the supreme leader of Iran, not liked by the Iranians at all. He's the leader of the IRGC. So we continue. Initially sparked by frustration over record high inflation, food prices, and currency depreciation, the protests quickly evolved into a broader movement demanding an end to the current regime. Beginning with the Bazari. A bazaar is basically a shop in the Middle East. It's like a market, basically. Beginning with the Bazari in Tehran's Grand Bazaar and later university students, the demonstrations soon spread to other major cities and small settlements. Protesters chanted anti-government slogans and attacked symbols of the government and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Somebody who spelled this got the abbreviation bit mixed up. So this is important as well. Although largely leaderless, the protests escalated on 8th of January following a call for unified protests by Reza Pahlavi. Now, Reza Pahlavi, as we said, the Pahlavi dynasty were the family that ruled Iran for the majority of the 20th century. So Reza is not the Shah who left Iran. Reza is the successor. He's from the same family. He's of royal blood. He's a monarchist. He's a crown prince. So again, not to be confused. The first generation we had in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini and the Shah are gone. We've now gone on to their successors, Ali Khamenei and Reza Pahlavi. So Reza Pahlavi at the moment is in exile. Where were we? On the 8th of January, 1.5 million protesters came out on the streets of Tehran, and by the 9th of January, 5 million protesters came out nationwide. Pahlavi has called for a peaceful transition and a referendum to decide Iran's future political system. The Iranian government, the IRGC, under Ali Khamenei, has cut off internet access and telephone services in an attempt to prevent protesters from organizing. It has accused the United States and Israel of fueling the protests, a claim which Israel's Mossad has confirmed. Now, that is true. Israel are an enemy of the IRGC. Israel are not an enemy of Iran, and Iran used to have a lot of Jews prior to the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And a lot of the Jews in Iran were forced out of Iran, and a lot of them went to Israel because they felt it was the only safe place that they could go. But the rhetoric we're seeing from the IRGC of accusing the West, it's accusing the United States of interfering and spreading and fueling these protests. That is, again, just knee-jerk reaction from the IRGC. They accuse the United States of pretty much anything. But we say here that Mossad, the Secret Service of Israel, has confirmed that actually Israel is helping stoke the fire. In this situation, I don't feel as though anybody can actually blame Israel for doing that, because the IRGC have stated numerous times that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So with what Israel and Mossad are doing, it could actually reasonably be said that what they're doing is self-defense. We go on. Let's go down. So by the 9th of January, hang on, I went down a bit too fast there. By the 9th of January, millions had taken to the streets in protest across all 31 provinces of Iran. On the 10th of January, at least 2,000 protesters have been killed nationwide during the previous 48 hours. So that's 2,000 people have been killed during a 48-hour window amid the internet blackout, as Iranian security forces escalated their use of live ammunition against demonstrators. Hospitals in Tehran and Shiraz were reported to be overwhelmed by injured protesters, many of them suffering gunshot wounds. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson confirmed security forces fired on protesters, raising international concern over human rights abuses. In addition, thousands were arrested during the violent crackdown. Despite the blackout, on the 10th of January 2026, The Guardian documented multiple reports of security forces opening fire on demonstrations, with one eyewitness stating they saw, quote, hundreds of bodies across Tehran. On 11th of January, a group of academics and professionals estimated the death toll at 6,000 based on reports from hospitals, not including bodies taken directly to morgues. So the death toll keeps rising, and in such a short space of time as well. So on the 13th of January, Iran International, a news station, reported that at least 12,000 had been killed. CBS News reported on the same day that activist groups in Iran estimated between 12,000 and 20,000 people were killed. It's shocking. I have to be honest, actually. I knew people had been killed in their thousands. But to actually now read those statistics and actually let it sink in, those actually are quite shocking, especially the higher end. And yeah, sure, a jump from 12,000 to 20,000 is quite a lot. That's like an 8,000 gap. And I'm hoping it's not 20,000. I really am not. But that's quite harrowing to just think that in such a short space of time, all those people have been killed. It's quite sobering. It really is. Oh, thank you very much. On that sobering thought, I've just been given a star of ramen. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, that I find that quite emotional. You know, bless them. I mean, it gets worse. It really. I literally just read the next line here of this. 17th of January, Sunday Times reported that a network of Iranian doctors within the country had calculated that, quote, at least 16,500 to 18,000 people have been killed and 330,000 injured. It goes up. I don't think I want to read those stats with you anymore. I'm sure you get the picture, but there's the number of deaths is closer to 30,000. That's shocking, and you think that this is done by the government of a country, and those stats are just very reflective of what people knew all along, which is that the IRGC do not care for their citizens, and they will not just put them in prisons and torture them and beat them for the smallest of what they perceive as threats, but they will happily kill them, use live rounds on their own people, as opposed to actually sit and listen to the grievances of people. They'd kill them en masse, and that statistic I just read out. This comes from News Nation as a reference, stated the number of deaths is closer to 30,000, and in such just a month, the Iranian government, IRGC, has killed estimated 30,000 of its own citizens. So as we can see, I mean, the causes as well, it started off with economic crisis, but that could well have just been the spark. The stated goal now of the protesters, of the revolution, is that no, we want the IRGC gone, because we know that we could demand economic reform. IRGC could play mind tricks and mind games and say, you know what, we're gonna give you economic reforms, or we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. The protesters go home. IRGC don't do anything on their promises. Instead, they're going to go around to the protesters, the revolutionaries' houses, and arrest them and kill them. So it's got to this stage now, and we saw this with a little bit with the Mahsa Amini protests in 2022. The Iranian people now just want the IRGC gone. They've been protesting against the IRGC for so many years, almost since day one. They want this regime gone. That is their end game. That is their stated aim now. They're done with Ali Khamenei. They're done with Ayatollahs. They're done with the Islamic Republic. They don't want it. So stated here again, goals. The main goal, overthrow the Islamic Republic government, the return of Reza Pahlavi to lead a transitional government, end of economic mismanagement, the stabilization of exchange rates, addressing of civilians and merchants' hardships. So what started out as their original stated goals are now actually the bottom of the list. I mean, they're still important. They really are, because they affect like everybody's working life and being able to put food on the table and pay bills. But yeah, the main thing is just get rid of the IRGC. Get it gone. They don't want it. Ongoing protests. So the belligerence we actually have in this, the IRGC, I mean, how strong are the IRGC at this moment, specific moment in time right now, and how strong are the protesters, revolutionaries? And as we said in beforehand, a lot of the protests in Iran have not succeeded because they've not had a clear leadership. All communications have been severed. The communication isn't so much an issue now because Mossad, as we've seen, Israeli Mossad, are helping stoking the fans of the discontent. So Israel is having a hand in the communications and keeping the Iranian people very much clued up and saying, look, if the Iranian IRGC has cancelled Iran's internet service and phone service, never mind, we can provide you with Israeli phone service and internet service, so you can still keep in communication with each other. America as well, like Trump has flexed his muscles. Trump has threatened Iran. I believe the IRGC attacked US bases in Qatar, and the States have actually now sent, I think it's USS Abraham. I might have got that a bit wrong, but I believe it's Abraham, have sent it to the region. So the IRGC and Ali Khamenei can actually see that Trump is actually now sending muscle into the region. And as we've seen now with Trump, he captured Maduro from Venezuela. He's flexing his muscles about Greenland. Whatever you think about that, right or wrong, the fact is that people internationally, they take Trump seriously. You know, whereas once before he was a bit of a buffoon who used to say stupid things. Nobody saw what was going to happen to Maduro. Everybody thought that was just rattling the saber. He came in and like kidnapped him overnight. Trump now saying what he's saying about Greenland. Trump saying he's going to send USS Abraham to threaten the Persian coast. And the IRGC have said, hey, wait a minute, but Trump abducted Maduro from Venezuela. Who's to say he's not going to do the same with us? So the IRGC may not want to admit it, but they're going to take Trump seriously. And with Israel and America, that is a powerful concoction militarily, who are now barking at Iran's gates and supporting the protesters. Interestingly as well, the the opposition of the protesters in Iran as well, anti-government demonstrators, demonstrators, police and military defectors, armed civilians. So members of the IRGC armed forces have actually defected to the protesters. Now, these people, like with any military network, they're going to have a general's going to have soldiers who serve underneath him. So the general's going to take his soldiers with him to join the protesters, the revolutionaries. They are also going to have insight, and more importantly, they're going to have knowledge of the ins and outs of the Iranian infrastructure, the Iranian establishment. These military personnel are going to know the state of the Iranian government and what their morale is like, how many people are in the cabinet, where their secret bases are, where their bunkers are, what emergency plans do they have in place, business contingent BCPs, business consistency plans they have in place for such issues like this. So those defectors going to the protesters will have a wealth of knowledge, which will be so valuable for the protesters. And of course, then they've got the backing and support of Israel and America. And this time, differently, the leadership of Iran is Reza Pahlavi from a distance, but he is stated as like the figurehead of the protesters. They're saying that they're seeing him as their leader, and basically Reza Pahlavi has been able to actually give orders and advice, suggestions from a distance to the protesters and saying, look, I will be coming back to Iran at a certain time. So keep doing what you're doing and I will return. The king will return. So that makes it different from all these previous protests where they've not had a clear leadership. This time they do. It's much more centralized now. It's got international backing, which again, the other protests never had international backing against the IRGC, whereas now they do. So that emboldens the protesters and the revolutionaries to keep going onto the streets. And as sad as it is, with all the deaths, as we said, you know, so many people have died already in such a short space of time. But they've not been cowed. They've not been scared away. By this time, any other protest in the world, the protesters would have coyed away and said, oh gosh, we're being shot at. Let's scarper. These people have not. They've stood there, they've taken the bullets, they've been injured, they've died to get rid of this oppressive, disgusting, inhumane regime whose only sole goal is to hold on to this power and to abuse its own people. That speaks volumes about the character of these protesters. So who is actually on the IRGC side? So of course we have the government of Iran armed forces. So the people who've not defected to the protesters, they still have the bulk of their armed forces, the Iranian army, the Iranian navy, the Iranian air force. The Islamic Republic of Iran Army, Police Command, which is a centralized law enforcement agency, Police Command of the Islamic Republic of Iran, abbreviated as Faraja or Naja, is the uniform police force in Iran. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC itself, again, Basij, as we said, formerly Sazman-e Basij-e Mostazafin, is a paramilitary volunteer militia within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and one of its 5 branches. An individual member is called a Basiji in the Persian language, and as we said, they're like the hired thugs, basically. But again, the thing is with Basij is that their loyalty can always be bought out with money, and they're not, despite all pomp and circumstance. Basij is not it's not centralized, it's not organized as such. Like it's just basically a group of thugs. And when the going is going to get tough for them, when Basij are going to see that actually the tide's very well turning against IRGC, Basij members are going to start disappearing. You know, literally, they're just going to leave Basij and they're going to go off and side with protesters, or I don't know, do something else. But, you know, who else do they have? They have pro-government counter-protesters and plainclothesmen. Again, you can't really take the Iranian government's face value at that. You don't know how many of those are paid protesters or Confederates who've been put in there by the IRGC. They have a lot of foreign Shia militias as well, by the count of it. They have their proxies. They have Hezbollah, which doesn't surprise, it shouldn't surprise, because Hezbollah is a paramilitary group mainly operating in Lebanon, but it's funded and backed by Iran. It's basically a cell. Hezbollah is a cell that was created by Iran to cause trouble in Lebanon during the Lebanese civil war, and also to spill violence into northern Israel. So it's no surprise that Hezbollah are now being pulled away from Lebanon back into Iran. They have, what other names do we know? A lot of these names are very, very obscure. Oh, what's this one? Harakat al-Nujaba, officially the 12th Brigade, is an Iraqi Shia paramilitary group that is especially active in Iraq and formerly in Ba'athist Syria. So again, it's another foreign militia, a Shia-led foreign militia which is operating in Iraq and Syria, is being pulled into Iran now. So a lot of militia is supporting the IRGC. Widespread deployment of 5,000 Iranian-backed Iraqi militiamen, tens of thousands of counter-protesters in Tehran per Iranian government. It's interesting, though, to see there's no real foreign governments which are siding openly with Iran. And of course, you know, there are going to be some of the quiet. You're going to get Qatar, who are basically the purse strings of Iran. They're going to be siding obviously with the IRGC, but they don't want to admit it because they know that even the Qataris know that the IRGC's days are well and truly numbered, and they don't want to side with a sinking ship. You're going to get Putin, who's probably secretly backing Iran, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, all these despotic people, all these whack jobs and weirdos, the leaders of the United Abominations are basically going to be siding with the IRGC, but they don't want to vocalize it. If they were convinced the IRGC were going to suppress this revolt and get rid of this revolution, they'd probably be a lot more openly, actively supporting it. And it's interesting as well because you saw North Korea send troops to Ukraine to fight for Russians, and they got absolutely mauled. So I feel that even North Korea has now realized actually its troops are not crack troops anymore. They never were to begin with. So the reactions, again, reactions of 2025 to 2026 Iranian protests, reactions to protests. Oh, reactions to the protests. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said official talks should happen with protesters, but added that rioters must be put in their place. So again, a very subjective use of language. He perceives to be a protester and then a rioter. And Ali Khamenei probably just looks at all of them as being rioters, knowing his poor state of mind. Vice President Mohammad Reza Araf attempted to resign during the first days of protest, but it was not accepted by the president of Iran, who's not Ali Khamenei, is a different guy. The president is a guy called Pezeshkian, President Pezeshkian. So again, methods, protests. Let's see where we are at the moment. So we're the 23rd of January, domestic. There's been foreign victims apparently as well. Canadian citizen was killed by Islamic Republic forces during protests. A former professional footballer, Mojtaba Tashiz, was killed. A powerlifting champion, a Persian powerlifting champion as well, Sharam Magsaudi, was killed. Government forces, we've already described about that. So yeah, what we'll do now, I just saw something come about executions again. I'm in two minds about whether or not I want to read that. Well, I want to read it because it's important, but whether or not I want to see the details again. Okay, so what we'll do now, this timeline only goes up to 22nd, which is yesterday of the date of this live stream. I'll read what has happened up to now. I'm not going to read about that execution thing because I feel as though that we all know that the IRGC it will kill people. It has killed people, and it will probably continue to kill people. So if you want to go onto Wikipedia or any other news source and find that yourself, then feel free to do so. But with all due respect, I don't think I'll read it tonight. Well, also as well, we'll briefly look at a map of Iran. It's a huge place, it really is. And then also we'll end on actually seeing what's happened to the Supreme Leader of Iran as of today. And I can't believe I'll actually be using BBC News as a reference to that. I don't even like BBC. I don't like BBC full stop. But let's look at, okay, so bearing in mind this has been going on since like the end of last year, 22nd of January. This is the most recent update. Okay, so here's the latest with what has happened. On the 22nd of January, Iranian state media released its first official casualty figures related to the protests, reporting that 3,117 people have been killed. The announcement stated that the dead included both civilians and members of the security forces, but provided no detailed breakdown or methodology of how the figures were compiled. Independent human rights organizations challenged the official casualty figures. HRANA reported that the death toll had surpassed 4,900 based on information compiled from hospital records, eyewitness testimony, and regional monitoring networks, and warned that the true number of fatalities was likely higher due to severe reporting constraints. HRANA later updated its data to state that the verified total had reached at least 4,519 confirmed deaths, with an additional 9,049 cases under review. On the same day, the United Nations Special Reporter on Human Rights in Iran stated the number of civilians killed may exceed 20,000, citing information received from civil society sources on a cumulative scale of the crackdown. HRANA, alongside other journalists and independent analysts, emphasized that discrepancies between the official and independent casualty figures were driven in part by near-total internet shutdowns, restricted information flows, limits, foreign media access, and security pressures on local reporters. These conditions, including arrest and intimidation of journalists, significantly hindered the ability of independent monitors to document fatalities comprehensively and to verify casualty data during protests. Okay, I do apologize. That was more about, like, again, death figures and stuff like that. I didn't think that little article was actually going to be going on about that. I thought it was just going to be like the latest and the actual on the floor. Again, 20th of January, it says that 18th of January, oh God, yeah, protesters being tortured and sexually assaulted in custody. More about deaths, minimal internet connectivity. What's this one? Oh God, more about deaths. Slow trickle of information emerging from Iran. Tehran, Eastern. Sorry, I'm actually just reading through here. Yeah. Okay. Not got that much news from that. Actually, I just wanted to see actually where the protests were at the moment. And what had actually happened in terms of like what was going on now. But actual protest sites across the whole of Iran. Apparently there's 512 locations across 180 cities and in all 31 provinces of Iran. So yeah, Iran is like divided into 31 provinces, states, counties, equivalent of. I'm not going to list every single 512 because that will take ages, but protests are recorded in multiple cities across Iran, primarily Tehran, which is the capital, Avaz, Arak, Dargahan, Farsan, Fasa, Fulad Shah, Hamadan, Esfahan, which again, Esfahan is one of the biggest cities, Aiza, Kermanshah, another important city, Mashhad, a spiritual city, Malik, Najafabad, Nurabad, Kishim, Qom, which is a spiritual heartland of Iran, Shiraz, another big city, Sari, and others. So it's pretty much all these protests across like the main sites, both spiritual and also economic. I believe also there's on the Gulf Coast as well, Persian Gulf, Bandar Abbas, Bushehr, I believe as well, actually have they have protests there too. So the map of Iran is huge. Last time I shared my screen, actually, the whole thing froze. So I'm quite reluctant to actually share the screen or the map of Iran. It has come up. I'm not going to risk it. No, I'm not going to risk it. I don't trust my internet connectivity at the moment. But yeah, seriously, go onto Google, type in Iran, and it will come up with the country of Iran, and you can actually see the main cities, the places where I've just listed. You can actually see where they are in Iran in relation to other things, and you'll actually see how widespread these protests are. It's not just tiny little areas; it's the whole country is up. It's great. It's not great. People are dying. Don't get me wrong, but it's good that it's like the whole country is now against this despotic regime, which needs to go. So we're going to end by finding out where is Ali Khamenei, because rumor has it, and this is why I went through the timeline just a minute ago. I wanted to find out what had happened to Ali Khamenei. So Ali Khamenei, as we said, he is the supreme leader of Iran. He's the leader of the IRGC. He's the nut job behind all the tortures and the oppression that's happening in Iran right now. He's the guy who's doing it, basically. He's the dictator. And I heard that he'd actually fled the country, or he's in hiding somewhere. So that's why I went through that timeline. I wanted to see like if there'd been any update on him, and sadly there wasn't. But I have found this source from BBC, and like I said, I hate BBC. I never use them for referencing, but it was the first thing that came up when I typed in "where is Ali Khamenei." So I hate to say this, but I'm going to look at BBC to get my news source. I hate myself, I really do. But let's find this. Okay, BBC. What date was this? The title is "What Next for Iran's Supreme Leader?" Oh, 16th of January. So it's about, yeah. Oh, he looks a real menace. Okay, so here we go. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in his secret hideout these days, knows he is now a marked man. He will not be sitting on his veranda anytime soon. No shit, Sherlock. When discussing what the United States might do next to help the protesters in Iran, US President Trump has mentioned Qasem Soleimani and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The former, Iran's all-important military strategist in the Middle East, was killed on the 3rd of January 2020 in a drone strike just outside Baghdad's international airport on the president's order. I remember that. The latter, who was the leader of IS, killed himself and 2 children by detonating a suicide vest on 27th of October 2019, when US forces raided his hideout in northern Syria after the approval of the president. But Ayatollah Khamenei also has the fate of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah to consider. Yeah, I remember when Nasrallah got killed as well by Israel. He was killed on the 27th of September 2024 in an Israeli air raid while 60 feet underground beneath a high-rise residential building in Beirut, where he was meeting his top lieutenants. The kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela recently, which we mentioned earlier, in a daring commando-style raid by US forces in Caracas, can't be far from the Ayatollah's mind, and we mentioned this as well. But it is not clear what impact the removal of the Iranian leader would have on the future of the protests that have been going on in Iran, or indeed on the future of the Islamic Republic, if indeed he's removed from power. President Trump is now weighing up his options, so where does this leave the supreme leader and his regime? A hated figure for Iranians. The 86-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei has been a hated figure for most Iranians. For years, protesters up and down the country have been calling for his downfall. He's been a terrible leader for the country. His regime has been among the most repressive in the world. Yeah, during his 36-year rule in the name of Islam, he has pursued relentless anti-American and anti-Western policies while relying on Russia and China for survival. He pursued a half-baked nuclear policy that has brought the country the second heaviest international sanctions in history after Russia, making the country poorer and struggling. His attempts to project power in the Middle East set the region on fire. His calls for the destruction of Israel have led to wars of Israel. In recent protests, Ayatollah Khomeini gave the green light for security forces to massacre protesters. So where is he? There are the rulers of abroad. Yep. So that is Reza Pahlavi, sorry. But having a lot of time to himself in the bunker, so he is in a bunker, Ayatollah Khomeini may be reviewing in his mind what has been going on in the past 3 weeks and how he got here. He may take satisfaction from the fact that the regime has so far remained loyal to him. There are no signs of significant dissent or disloyalty in the Revolutionary Guard, which was created to safeguard the regime in the first place. President Trump's words have given the impression that possible US attacks on the bases of the Revolutionary Guard and other security forces may weaken and fracture them and give space for protesters to come out in even bigger numbers to topple the regime. Tying on with an iron fist. More from Deb. Actually, no, that's a little bit disappointing as well. That doesn't actually say where Ayatollah Khomeini. Well, it mentioned he was in a bunker. Is he still in the bunker? Well, that was the 16th of January, remember? So, I mean, that's, what, a week ago? That was last week. Anything could have happened then, and there was no update that I saw about where Ayatollah Ali Khomeini is or what he's up to. Is he still in his bunker? Has he fled the country? You know, maybe, like we said earlier, and what was mentioned there on BBC, he was very much thinking about Nicolas Maduro and what the States did to Maduro. And he thinks maybe with the help of Mossad and the States, they can do a joint operation and kidnap him, essentially. You know, they've proven they can do it. They've taken out all these Hamas, Hezbollah leaders, Yahya Sinwar, Hassan Nasrallah. Wouldn't put it by the States or Israel to do that. So it may very well be in Khomeini's best interest, actually, to leave Iran. But where would he go? Russia, China, North Korea? Who knows? Guys, I feel that actually concludes the end of this live stream. Try to end it on a bit of a positive, saying that personally, I believe that these protests will keep going. They're not showing any sign of stopping. They're being done by ordinary Iranians. They're getting a lot of defectors from Iran's armed forces. Trump's getting involved. Israel are very much involved. They've admitted they're involved. Iran deserves better. And I have genuinely believed this for a very long time. I don't believe that the IRGC is offering anything beneficial to its people. How they're responding to these protests is a testament to how little they care about their own citizens. And if you're going to have a government that doesn't have your best interests at heart, then they're not a government worth having. Quite simply. I've been surprisingly touched, I feel, by just reading those stats about how many people have actually been killed. I wasn't aware of that number. So I do genuinely feel for that. I feel for the Iranian people as a collective. They're such beautiful people. I've worked with quite a few Iranians, and I can say that, yeah, sure, it's a bit of a generalization saying that all Iranians are great people. You know, I'm sure there are the odd nut jobs like Khomeini, who's obviously like the exception. But all the Iranians who I've met have just been like really lovely people. They've been so accommodating. They're so hospitable. They love their country. They're hardworking people. They're extremely benevolent people, I find. And Iran's been one of the most accommodating countries prior to what's happening to it and what has happened from forces which just want death, destruction, and ill will. I hope Iran gets its freedom, and I hope Iran gets liberated soon, and that these deaths stop, and the Iranian people can choose their next leader who has the Iranian people's best interests at heart. I genuinely believe. I genuinely want that to happen, and I genuinely believe that the Iranians can make it happen. thank you for tuning in and listening to this. And I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, train hard, and keep rooting for the Iranians, because they're the coolest people around. Peace.